we remember a time, we remember moments. A kaleidoscope of the sights, the sounds, the emotions that remind us of the way we were. Our world. It's about time. Tonight, Long Winter, Short Spring, 1937. Here are Linda Ellerbee and Ray Gandolf.
For the next hour, think of your television set as a time machine.
Marcel your hair, put on your bib overalls, jump into the Studebaker. Let's go back 50 years.
Welcome to the long winter and short spring of 1937. For nearly 8 years, depression has covered our world with the darkness of winter. But now at last, nights seem to be getting shorter. Our confidence in tomorrow seems to be stronger. But what if the brighter lights of April only make it easier for us to see other, even more terrible consequences of seasons past? Or worse, give us a glimpse of the longer, darker winter to come, that of World War.
As 1937 began, this country's economic roller coaster was on a high. Another plunge was coming, but that winter, it seemed happy days were almost here again. The music went around and around, and it came out here.
If our confidence was recovering faster than our economy, we pretended not to notice. After all, more people were working now, weren't they? Stock prices were up, right? Corporations were announcing extra dividends again. Did you hear? The worst was over, wasn't it? Wasn't it? As if to prove it was, we went right out and bought something, and went right on proving depression is always part manic.
I push the middle valve down, the music goes down around, below, 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 dealio, listen to the jazz come out. I push the other valve down, the music goes round and around, whoa, and it comes out here. The music goes round and round and round.
It comes out here, too. These are Americans. If the Democratic ideal and the Democratic New Deal had failed them, at least the now not-so-new Democratic president, in his second inaugural address, did not fail to mention them.
I see millions lacking the means to buy the products of farm and factory, and by their poverty, denying work and productiveness to many other millions. I see 1/3 of a nation ill-housed, ill-clad, ill-nourished.
Franklin Roosevelt had promised that in America nobody would starve to death. He was wrong. Yet the poor claimed they didn't blame the president. They said he meant right. Maybe he did, but the Congress wasn't as cooperative as it had been, and the New Deal was about to be dealt out. Alphabet soup. The federal government, through programs like the WPA, Works Progress Administration, had given people jobs when private enterprise could not, but the government had gone deep in debt trying to run the country and remodel it at the same time. But oh my, what a New Deal the New Deal had been for art in America. John Houseman ran the Harlem branch of the Federal Theater Project.
The New Deal was very sensitive. It's not fashionable now, I know, but the fact is that there was a humanity and there was a decency and there was a sort of creative courage there, which was quite extraordinary.
Jobs for the artists, art for the masses. About 30 million Americans saw productions by the Federal Theater for next to nothing.
The Federal Theater was aimed at a broad-based, non-opulent audience. The fact that the tickets were that cheap simply brought people into the theater, particularly at the time when there was no money around anyway.
In the Federal Writers Project was a young actor named Studs Terkel.
In many communities, people in small towns saw flesh and blood actors in classics for the first time in their lives. It enriched their lives. When you think of that period, you think of something terribly exciting in the midst of adversity. It was a moment of contradiction, paradox, one of great despair and of exhilaration at the same time.
There was despair in the faces of the desperate. There was exhilaration in revealing that despair to comfortable America. A job for the photographers of the Farm Security Administration. One of them was Carl Maidans.
I came to the FSA late in the Depression years, the greatest depression in the history of the country. It was a very exciting prospect. Imagine, if you will, yourself being sent out to see America and to photograph anything you think you want to photograph. That was our assignment.
The FSA photographers showed us that there, but for the grace of God and good birth, stood we all.
It is an intimate picture of America, and all the photographers who made pictures for the Farm Security Administration became notable names among American photographers. The Dorothea Langs, the Arthur Rothsteins, the Russell Lees, the Walker Evans.
Most Americans experienced poverty secondhand, filtered through the sensitivities of photographers, actors, artists, writers. The White House had a direct pipeline, about 3,000 letters every day, angry, hopeful, despondent letters were written to President and Mrs. Roosevelt.
Dear friend and lady of the White House, we have always tried to get by without help, but we can't feed our family and clothe them.
To our president, what we men want is work. We're not asking for anything but what we're entitled to. President Roosevelt, we are poor people, but we are human. We wish to be treated that way.
I am a girl of 18 years old. If I won't get any help from you, dear Mr. President, then I'll take my life away. I can't stand it no longer. We were thrown out on the street a few times. I hate the way I'm living now.
We are in a land of plenty, but I see a good many of us are starving. I am now at the point of desperation. All I want is a chance. It is my last hope and effort. All else has failed.
Sometimes when you had no job or a bad job, you just shouldered what you could and moved on. Carl Maidans captured such a couple forever.
I was in a car, and I saw them in a distance coming down the road. And in those years, when you saw two people walking down the road carrying what little they had, you knew that they were in trouble. They said that the plantation owners in that area paid cheap wages, too cheap for them, and they were on their way hoping to find another plantation where they could earn more money.
Thanks to these pictures, the one-third of America that was ill-housed, ill-clad, and ill-nourished had become inescapable.
We must make a record of what you see in happenings, in things, and in people, so that they will be distinguished, so that people who look at them will know what they are. And you must think of history when you're making these pictures. These pictures are going to last forever. They are going to be America's record of what was happening in America in these years.
If photographs could be socially meaningful, and they could, naturally writers were going to prove no picture could ever be worth 1,000 words. And some writers came close. The rest generally confused serious with important. What sold best? Well, as always, a little reality went a long way. In fiction, Gone with the Wind. In nonfiction, how to win friends and influence people. In general, motors. And in my trade, that's called a tease. Come back to 1937. There's more to that story, even pictures.
Our world will continue in a moment with Long Winter, Short Spring, 1937.
Tums is one antacid that can really handle heartburn. It's a lot stronger than the #2 brand.
That's one good reason we use Tums. And Tums happens to be rich in calcium.
That's the second good reason.
Dinner? You're in New York. I'm in Paris.
Ever hear of the airplane?
Nothing less than finesse.
Tonight, your hair has to look its best, and it will. You use Finesse.
Feeling beautiful. Nothing less than beautiful. Nothing less than finesse.
May I suggest the coq au vin?
Finesse Conditioner. The perfect conditioning whether your hair needs a little or a lot.
Nothing less than finesse.
When I go on vacation, I leave the entertainment to Ricardo, the cooking to Francois, and the picture-taking to Minolta.
Introducing Minolta Freedom Dual, a touch of the button for group shots and telephoto, too.
I leave it all to my Freedom Dual.
It's autofocus with 2 built-in lenses. Your check?
You can leave that to my husband.
Minolta Freedom cameras for great pictures.
You know who to leave it to.
Only the mind of Minolta.
Here's your coffee, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Were you ever a dancer?
Me? No.
I'll bet you took some lessons.
Actually, I did when I was a kid, and I loved them, but...
But?
Well, I'll tell you, these feet are meant for working.
Well, you make it look like dancing in the aisles.
It must be my Kinney shoes, then.
Whatever you say.
It's been wonderful talking to you.
Need another tempting reason to spread Philadelphia brand cream cheese? Ounce for ounce, Philly's got half the calories of butter or margarine.
Start spreading the news. Friday, Webster's birthday is full of surprises.
The ticket?
Then George hits the big time.
Ta-da! I gotta go upstairs, loosen up the old pipes.
Would you like some Drano? Mr. Belvedere. Tomorrow.
My kind of town.
Welcome back to the long winter and short spring of 1937. An automobile is not made like a watch or a chocolate cake. One person or a few people nursing it along from design to completion. A car is made by hundreds of people doing one small job over and over again as the various parts come down the line. To be made into a car by hundreds of other people at some other assembly line doing one little job over and over and over. It's not fun, but it used to be a lot worse before the winter of '37 in Flint, Michigan.
At General Motors, things look pretty good now, and you know what they say. What's good for General Motors is good for the USA and the DuPont family and the other stockholders and the management and just about everybody except maybe the folks putting the cars together. So what? Chevys are more popular than unions. If Mary Nightingale wants to keep on sewing seat cushions, she better get that through her head.
We were sitting around on a truck eating our lunch, and I just happened to say to some of the men, they were complaining about the working conditions, and I said, what you need in here is a good union. And one man said to me, he says, lady, he said, you talk union in here, you go out on your ear.
Which may explain why only 1 in about every 400 workers for GM in Flint belongs to the UAW. Workers need work, even if it's seasonal, with few benefits and plenty of risk. It's one thing knowing you aren't going to die rich. It's another suspecting you aren't going to die old. Ken Malone, 8 years on the job so far.
No way could I have survived under the conditions I was working under. Absolutely impossible. We work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week.
The company doesn't seem to care, and so far the union can't seem to make the company care. What can the workers do? Nothing. That's what. And so on December 30th, 1936, that's what the workers do. At 2 different GM plants in Flint, they sit down and do nothing. Stephen Richvalsky, 19 years old, one of the youngest workers to sit down.
Well, when we pulled that caper on December 30th, we came back in the plant. We shut that plant down. Hey, look, we were skating on thin ice. But management didn't know this. By sitting in the plant, we prevented any production from occurring. There was no way management could bring in outside people because we were in there to prevent that.
What they can't prevent is GM asking for a court order to evict them from GM property. Anybody from Flint knows that, even a Democratic congressman like Andrew Transu.
The sit-down strike was illegal because it is unlawful for a person to take possession of your property and to convert it to their own use and to exclude you from it.
That's what the court says, too. GM owns GM. But then the workers discover the judge owns GM, too. About $200,000 worth, which beats a court order any day.
They used every legal document that was available to them to get us out of there, but then, of course, it was force against force, and we weren't about to go out of there.
A sit-down has shut down a giant. Inside, workers will exercise and go on living in the place in which they exercised their will to not go on working. Roscoe Rich, sitting down with spirits up.
I wasn't much to let my spirits get very low. We had something to keep us going. We had games we played. We enjoyed ourselves while we was in there.
We had a couple, 3 musicians in there. They came in there. They were in, but they had the guitars brought in.
Confidence today, consequences tomorrow.
Now when the speed up comes, you just twiddle your thumbs and sit down, sit down. And when you want them to know that they better go slow, sit down, sit down, sit down, take a seat, sit down and rest your feet, sit down, you've got 'em beat, sit down, sit down.
Feeding the strikers takes 500 pounds of meat, 300 loaves of bread, and 100 pounds of potatoes every day. On January 11th, company police try to cut the lifeline, starve the strikers out. Striker Fred Ahern was there when the battle was drawn.
Our existence was on the line because it was our jobs, it was our family. Everything from that point on becomes kind of wild because everyone was fighting everybody else. We tipped over cars and tore them apart with our bare hands, and if you ever see men tear something apart with their bare hands, it's one of the most frightening things you ever see in your life.
One of the field generals for the strikers was Union official Victor Ruther.
I happened to be on the scene sitting in the sound truck when the attack came. They began lobbing shells and firing rifles. And the strikers resisting, not only in the picket line, but those inside.
From the windows, the strikers pelt the cops with whatever comes to hand. Union newspaperman Henry Krause is arrested.
And at this point, the police turned around and drew their guns and shot. Wounded 16 workers, 2 of them that we thought were going to die.
On the morning of January 12th, the all-night battle is over. Nobody died. 2,000 National Guardsmen are ordered into Flint by the new governor, Frank Murphy, who has been in office only 10 days. The strikers fear, and the company hopes, that the National Guard will clear the plants. But Murphy has ordered them to roust nobody, just keep the peace. Now, the Flint Alliance, a loose-knit organization of anti-union groups, holds a rally against the strike. Vigilante violence increases. 4 union organizers are beaten, their car driven off the road. One result, hundreds of strikers who have been reluctant to join the union sign up. And women leave their homes for the front lines. Dorothy Krause was one of their leaders.
Now, I'll never forget the first time we did that. A man came, one of the strikers, opened a window, and he yelled out, "That's my wife there. She's picketing. Look at her." You know, he had never thought in his life that something like that would happen to his wife.
Still no paychecks, only bitter cold. After 3 weeks, GM has not been shut down, and the sit-downers have only a standoff.
Most of the people got, you know, because the anxiety, the duration of the strike, we're getting tired of this. But us younger fellas that knew we were going to be fired if the strike wasn't successful. We had no second thoughts.
The union has a plan. If it can take over GM's most heavily guarded facility, Chevrolet assembly plants all over the country will have to shut down. As a diversion, the workers sit down at a different plant, and the company police go for the bait.
We hadn't much more to shut the doors when the police were shooting tear gas through them. They blowed the door, blowed the glass out first, then blowed the tear gas in, and it was raising heck that way.
After the gassing, the women rush to the aid of the men.
They're gassing them, they're choking them, so all of us went to the plant, and every one of the windows was broken.
The company wins a Pyrrhic victory. It clears out that plant, but the union's real target has been left lightly defended. And by late afternoon that day, February 1st, the 3,000 workers at the key plant have occupied it and shut it down. General Motors is wounded and bleeding money. But now the strikers are told to get out within 24 hours. GM's boss, William Knudsen, has obtained a court order. Will the strikers leave? On February 2nd, they send Governor Murphy a telegram. They'll die first.
The day of settling labor disputes by force and violence, I hope, has gone forever in our country. We want the rule of reason to survive.
8 days after Murphy's speech, the rule of reason survives. On the 44th day of the strike, Knudsen signs an agreement recognizing the United Auto Workers Union. The longest sit-down strike in American history has ended. A new outlook on life for American labor has begun.
I could hardly believe it, you know, that we brought General Motors to their knees, you know, a giant corporation like that.
I never had anything till we got our union. And when we got the union in and we got a living wage, well, I could manage fine.
Today, we can sit back, we can retire with dignity.
And if the boss is in the way, we're gonna roll right over him. We're gonna roll right over him. We're gonna roll right over him. Well, if the boss is in the way, we're gonna roll right over him. We're gonna roll the union.
Well, the unions sure did roll, bringing dignity and an adequate paycheck to more and more millions of American working men and women for about 20 years. Then along about 1956, the number of white collars in the workforce surpassed the blue collars. Now these accoutrements of the laboring man look almost like relics. You don't need them to work in a boutique or a Burger King. Dignity, adequate paycheck, well, you can still take that up with your union, if you have one. Right now, come back to our world and radio days.
Things come back to stores. Things come back to Sears.
Oh, I think you want to go that way.
And it's a beautiful bottle.
But if you ever decide to return something to Sears, you don't have to give us a lengthy explanation.
Oh, I understand. Oh, don't worry. We'll take care of it.
All you have to say is, you're not satisfied. In some cases, you don't even have to say that.
Sonny, this is tough.
Granny, this is tougher. Sunlight. It cuts tough, baked-on, caked-on food, even grease.
Ooh, thanks a lot, Sonny.
Sunlight with lemon juice. It cuts the tough stuff loose.
Feel fresh all day with Shield deodorant soap. 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, fresh. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, fresh. Gonna feel fresh the whole day through with Shield. Fresh all day with Shield.
Taster's Choice, the image of gourmet store coffee. Only Taster's Choice uses a superior blend of the very same coffee beans found in gourmet stores, Arabica beans, the world's costliest and most flavorful. Gourmet store coffee and Taster's Choice, a remarkable resemblance. Enjoy the richness, aroma, and flavor. Regular or naturally decaffeinated, the choice for taste is Taster's Choice.
Marie, the dawn is breaking, Marie.
Our world will be right back.
To find our hearts are aching, and 'tis
1986, two boxers clashed with one goal to win the WBA World Light Heavyweight Championship. In one corner, Marvin Johnson, former champ, determined to regain the title. His opponent, undefeated Leslie Stewart. When the ring cleared, Johnson left with a crown. Now Stewart looks to avenge his only loss in a live championship rematch. Plus, a day before the big race, a live report on the Indy 500. All on ABC's Wide World of Sports, Saturday.
Simulcast wagering is off and running in Bakersfield now at the Kern County Fairgrounds. Capture the excitement of horse racing live from Golden Gate Field in Bay Meadows on our big screen TVs. Whether you bet the favorite or long shot, you are sure to be a winner, as a portion of wagering proceeds stay right here in Kern County to improve our fairgrounds. Simulcast wagering in the Kern County Fair, a winning combination.
Get ready for the biggest sale event in history on America's #1 selling imports. It's the Nissan Super Sale. Your Balcos Nissan dealers have slashed prices on every Nissan in stock, from the complete lineup of hard-body trucks to the economical Sentras and the luxurious and powerful Maximas. You'll even get unheard-of discounts on the Pathfinder, voted 4x4 of the year. The Nissan Super Sale, on now at Nissan of Bakersfield, in the Bakersfield Auto Mall, south of White Lane, off Weibel.
Bakersfield street fairs are back. We'll take a look on Night Beat.